Okay, good. Most of us are here, so we can start this. We can start our session. Um, Hello again. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and welcome to another week of urban design theory and urban morphology, where we'll talk a bit about the intangible determinants of urban form. Last week we had Last week we talked about the tangible determinants of urban form, such as the topography, and um, the other driving factor was transportation, and the advancement of transportation technology. Now, this week we'll have a look at the other board, which are social, cultural, political, and economic factors or economic drivers to to urban morphology. Now, you have detailed or described how these factors shape the urban environment. And so, what I'd like to do today is I'll talk about some, not all, because there's quite a lot. There's a lot more to talk about than last week. So this week um, I'll, I'll reintroduce to you the cultural aspects that drive urban morphology, um, the religious aspects, and how religious aspects and religious considerations in urban morphology, and last but not least, for this week is the political drivers of morphology. Sorry. So, when we talk about culture, then we're more we focus more on the norms and the values of a group of people or a community or a society. So, societal norms influence a society's way of life, and thus their way of life dictates their daily activities. And the way of life and their daily activities are reflected in the way they build their settlements, whether it be villages, towns, or even cities. So, where do these societal norms come from? Well, most of the times, societal norms um, come from a transcendental understanding of cosmology and rituals. So it is something that is passed down from one generation to another, and throughout that time, it may shift. It may shift a little bit, but most of the times, it never deviates uh, from the core meaning. It just adapts to the changing times. And another source of societal norms is a community's way of life. Um, and then a community's way of life. For example, if you find yourself growing up in a predominantly agricultural society, then I'm sure that you will have different norms and different ways of life, different habits to those who live in a non agricultural society, in a more urban society, for example. The third possible source of societal norms is settlement culture that reflect the settlement hierarchy. So village, town, regency, city. Um, this sort of settlement awareness, as we will continue this session and find out, is that not all societies um, not all societies have the same sort of settlement culture. I'll talk a little bit about that later on. And the last bit is local wisdom and its role in maintaining and preserving the natural environment. So, point D is that societal norms or the values that the values that that a society adopts um, can sometimes have something to do in the way they view and the way they view and the way they maintain, so or in their relationship with the natural environment around them. So I'd like to start with a couple of local concepts. Now, village settlements. I can argue that I can confidently argue that village settlements are the oldest form of organized housing in Indonesia. Perhaps not exclusively to Indonesia, but also to other parts of Southeast and perhaps even East Asia. Village settlements. They all the cities stem or they started out as simple humble village settlements. And the other local concept that I'd like to highlight is that our urban settlements are deeply rooted in the rural traditions, and our rural traditions are are strongly influenced by agrarian structures and the spirit of gotong royong, the spirit of gotong royong. I always have difficulties explaining or describing gotong royong to foreigners, but I would say gotong royong is the spirit of it's a community spirit. It's a spirit of togetherness. We do things together. We accomplish things together. So that's the kind of spirit that shape the social life in Indonesia. I think in most parts of Indonesia. So that that sort of spirit carries on with it. So it started out when we were still, it started out when not us, but um, when our ancestors lived in village settlements, and then as our society progresses from village settlements to more urban settings, that spirit carries on. And I think I mentioned last week or a couple of weeks ago that we do have this duality in our we do have this sort of duality in our urban landscapes, in that we have skyscrapers, yet on the right next to the skyscrapers or right between the buildings, we have very dense urban settlements that resemble village settlements known as kampong. Um, a good friend of mine from Shanghai once said that she really liked the term that we use to describe urban villages, desa kota. Although desa kota doesn't exactly translate into urban village, but apparently that term strikes a tone with her because it is also very similar. It's a very similar situation in China. Wherever you look at it, you look at big cities in China, then desa kota is there as well, or urban villages, or urban villages or kampungs. They're all over the place. So that's nice. And so we carry this spirit on, and as our urban dualism continues, I think the spirit of gotong royong, although we may not feel like that spirit is there, but I think I think especially in dire situations, that spirit then pops up again to to help build and bolster our resilience. But I'm gonna take you around. I'm gonna take you around different major cultures across our country. So in in Tanah Toraja, the settlement hierarchy is based on scale, physical scale. For example, each house or each residence is known. But please, if anyone happens to come from Tanah Toraja and you feel that no, sir, you're mistaken, don't feel bad or don't feel bad or don't feel embarrassed to correct me. You can just pop your hand up or turn your mic on and say, no, I'd like to correct you in this aspect. So each resident is known as a banua, banua, and a group of residences called a tondo, and then a cluster of a cluster of villages is is known as a talung lembangna, or greater settlement, so to say. And this greater settlement is generally, as far as I have read, is only limited to a few areas. So it's not like a huge sprawling settlement, but maybe only two or three talung lembangnas, or yeah. Um, so people in Tana, also Tana in Toraja, sorry, rewind. In Toraja, cities only emerged at the turn of the 20th century, around 1906, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 1905 or 1906. You can double check that if you like. In Rante Pao and Makale, which happened to be developed by the Dutch colonial administration. So Toraja people traditionally do not build urban settlements, as in massive settlements. And it's possible that they don't view, or they did not view, cities as a necessity prior to interacting with the outside world. So they were happy with the way things were going for them, right up until European settlers came and engaged or interacted with the local communities. So the way their settlements are configured, I would say, um, gravitates or their settlements or their residences are they're oriented towards open spaces that then function as open spaces, or as roads, or as circulatory facilities, and even for certain religious rituals. So in Aceh, again, if anyone happens to be from Aceh, please let me know if this is not you, or if this is not true. Um, but urban life in Aceh flourished under the influence of the Islamic culture, especially those coming from Gujarat, so the Gujarati culture, um, in India. And urban settlement areas were not exactly centralistic, if I may say so, under the rule of the king. Um, the settlement units are called kampong, uh, similar to the Javanese terminology, kampong, and political powers, or the rulers, is the ruling class is divided into two major groups. I think I forgot what they're called. Goodness me. But they are divided into two groups, and then and that's how they administer the daily the daily operations of their settlements. And it is worth noting that some settlements, some kampongs, are situated in rural areas. Um, some some of these settlements then then some of these settlements then continue to evolve and um, thus forming the basic structures or the basic framework um, for a greater urban society. Um, so they continuously evolve with the growth and development of trade and worship activities, and yeah, and then they continue on to they continue on to evolve into much greater and much prominent cities. So in Java or in Java, the term that we use to describe cities or any other form of settlements, um, any other form of settlements to distinguish itself from rural settlements or village is the term kuto. Kuto, spelled Kuta, Kuta, but read as Kuto. So the term Kuto was established to distinguish urban settlements from rural or village settlements. And Kuto is defined as a settlement that is protected by a rectangular shaped wall. This rectangular shaped wall, or known as a pasagi, pasaki, um, and the wall is used as a barrier to protect the dalam inside or the house, to protect the territory while at the same time giving a property definition of the or while at the same time giving a clear definition between the inside and the outside spaces. Now, the relationship between the city, the Kuto, and the state in not only in Java but also in Bali. So in Java and Bali, um, it's it's known as a relation. The relationship is known as a Kuto state, and that shows the relationship between the institution of power, sorry, within the settlements and the management of its territory. Um, and I guess that has something to do with the fact that one of the largest kingdoms, from Java, then expanded and influenced other regions of Indonesia. So, for example, the Majapahit kingdom, they developed the concept of puri pura, or a kraton, puri pura, Kuto, Nagoro, and then Amanjanagara. So it's the palace, city or settlement, and then the greater settlement, Nagara, and then foreign places or Amanjanagara. During the during the Islamic Mataram period of Sultan Agung, they developed the concept of Prabayeksa, Kraton, Negari Kung, and then Negeri Seberang. So this is a similar concept of the place. The first place would be the place of power, or the palace, or that's the concentration of power, and then perhaps the inner circle that supports the inner workings of the kingdom, and then the people, and then the people, the common people, and then it's people outside. It is people outside the society. So that sort of hierarchy is was common, and so hence and I think that's where the concept of urban settlements, at least in Java, that's where it came from. Um, so and then ultimately the hierarchy of Javanese settlements then turns into dusun. Dusun is usually led by elders, great your grandfather or your just think of your grandfather or great grandfather, great great grandfather, and such. So dusun, and then a greater unit called the desa, and then the desa led by a lurah, and then the kademangan led by the demang, and then kuto led by the king. So that's the sort of hierarchy. That's the sort of urban-rural hierarchy in Javanese settlements. And some typical features of the a typical feature of the Javanese settlement is the kraton, of course, the palace, and then they have the alun-alun as one of the defining features of a Javanese city or traditional Javanese city. Nowadays, I think that the word or the meaning of alun-alun has shifted to a greater extent. That most people seem to think that alun-alun is just another outdoor open space, but alun-alun is a lot more than just an outdoor open space. Um, but you'll get to that you'll get to that once we talk about urban design. Still around Java, we do have the Tanian Lancheng in Madura. Anyone here from Madura? Anyone here from Madura or have family in Madura? Okay. Dinda, can you please explain what the Tanian Lancheng is?
Uh, I know. I just know Tanian Lancang is like uh, some houses in one area for families.
Okay. But thank you very much. There are there are two keywords there. It's a group of houses, yes, and families, yes, yes, yes. So the houses or the group of houses, um, or let's just say that the group of buildings here, not just houses, because it consists of it consists of several different house and a house, and sometimes though not always, I've seen a couple of translation to this layout, but most of the time it's like this. So the house, and then a communal kitchen at the ends of the house. So, but who lives in this house? That's more important. That's the most important bit. It's it's more of a house for your extended family. So, for example, if you have children and then your children marry, they would occupy the house next door to yours, and so on and so forth. Thus, forming this sort of village. And at the center of the settlement is the house of worship, or langar, and they would have cages for small animals, uh, poultry and maybe some cattle, and of course you can't forget the clean water source at the at not always in the same position, but the configuration varies from one place to a linear. It is a linear configuration with the house with western end of the settlement. So this is a portrait of one of the many. I don't think there's that many. I don't think there's that many left around. Linda, what do you think? Are there still many Tanian Lanjang around, or only a few left?
I think it is only a few, sir.
Okay, so well, that's a shame, but I think so. So this form of settlement is becoming more and more rare nowadays because well, I think are shifting to more people are shifting to a more modern settlement. That's one possibility. Or another possibility is that the younger generations don't want to stay there, and they want to seek out other opportunities because opportunities in their hometown or in their village is very limited. So they move out, and slowly but surely, these I would say magnificent. I would say fascinating settlements um, soon die out. But not all traditional settlements die out. There are a few. There are a few in Indonesia that still stand the test of time. This is one example. The Badui people. They they reject the use or they reject they refuse not, I wouldn't say reject, but they refuse to adopt any technological advancements because they view new technologies as a threat to the environment. And so they maintain their way of life as they have done so for the past 100 odd years, and well, it has worked out for them. And I think at one time, um, I think at one time I saw on the news that they have one of the lowest, or perhaps even they have zero cases of COVID-19 in their settlement, and that's perhaps due to the fact that they're quite isolated, or they isolate themselves from other people. And then another settlement is Kampung Naga. So all in all, the traditional settlements from one place to another, um, in Indonesia at least, from the extreme east to the extreme west, uh, local wisdom. Each settlement's each society's local wisdom is reflected in their spatial arrangement, whether it is to respond to it is to respond to geographical features, or it is to reflect their beliefs, values, and norms. For example, in the Tanian Lanjang, the house of worship is situated to the west, so that you can easily orient yourself, so that they can easily orient themselves to Mecca, um, and that house of worship, or that house of worship has a very significant value to them, because it is separated from other functions and facilities. So most, I wouldn't say all, but most traditional settlements, also they have they acknowledge that there is some sort of sacred or a higher rank place, and then they also have profane or bottom spaces. I just remembered, I didn't put the I didn't put the Balinese spatial configuration here, because I think that's quite unique as well. Um, but anyways, let's push on. Um, so local concepts in urban development show that local culture has a huge influence on the social structure of the community. That in turn influences the morphology of the city. So historically our society has gone through many different phases and many different dynasties. But the Hindu, Buddhist, Islamic civilizations, I think they contributed significantly to the development of the social structure of our society, of the Indonesian society at the state level. I think only a few areas, I've noted here only a few areas like Minangkabau, East Kalimantan, Makassar, that um, like Delhi, Siak, Palembang, Jambi, Bali, and Java. They're the ones. They're the societies that know of the state system. Other areas are not so familiar with the urban civilization and the state system. And these sort of settlements still generally show the roots of the Austronesian culture, so still very deeply rooted in their own traditions. And so the sociocultural development of society, as I mentioned, they greatly influence the development of the urban morphology. And I'm just curious to find out where each and every one of you are from, actually. And if you don't mind, to spare a couple of minutes, a few minutes with sharing the traditional settlements from your hometown or village, if you happen to be from a village. Would anyone care to share? I know one from Madura, and I think if I read the student records correctly, I think there are a few who are from who happen to be from a different island. So please do speak up, share with us where you're from, and then if you can, to the best of your knowledge, um, describe the traditional settlements from your hometown or village. Anybody? No? How about our colleagues from Japan? Do any of you happen to come from a small town or a village, or perhaps your relatives come from a perhaps your relatives live you have relatives that live in a village or in a small town? Would you like to share with us? Okay, well, perhaps another time, or maybe I should make it an assignment. That would be a good idea, actually. Well, with regards to with regards to Indonesian settlements, I have put well. At first, I put these four references in, but then I found some more, and so do check out the week 5 reference folder. Um, most, if not all, are in. I think most of them are in Bahasa Indonesia, unfortunately. But if our colleagues from SIT would like to access and find out what's going on, then you can ask your peers for help. For those of you who I think Medan is in one of the group assignments option. For those of you who happen to choose Medan as your case study location, um, I think you're gonna like number four. And there's another reference by Wahid et al. Who talk about the morphology of Medan and other cities similar to it. But the thing is, the catch is this: that the research report that I found is not in Bahasa Indonesia. It's not in English. It's in Malay. So yeah, have fun with that. There's also another one that's similar to this. I forgot what, but it also describes the evolution of a city of the city over an extensive period of time. Not as extensive as 500 years, but still about 200 years or so. That's quite extensive. But anyways, have a look, and I'm sure you'll find them very interesting and very useful for your assignments. Now, moving on from the local cultures, local traditions to religion or faith, a faith-based city. What is a religious city? Well, a religious city is a city that is perceived as having sacred dimensions or sacred values. A religious city can be a holy city whose physical structure depicts intense ritual activity. Think of Mecca in Saudi Arabia. Um, Intense ritual activities during certain times of the year, and then sorry, the sentence in number three is a bit jumbled. But I can assure you I wasn't drunk when I wrote this. Now, the city where religions were born, such as Mecca and Jerusalem, not the other way around. It could be a city of worship to major gods, such as the god Ammon in Thebes or Siva in Benares. It could also be a city in which the king exerted influence and power by elaborating on cosmological meanings, such as what Jayavarman the Seventh did with Angkor Thom. We'll have a look at a few. I'm sure there's. This is not by all means an extensive list, but let's have a look at a few. This is an aerial view of Mecca, and Mecca holds a very important place in Islam, and it is the holiest city in all branches in all variations of Islam. So the city derives its importance from the role it plays in the pilgrimage or the Hajj and the Umrah. I found this really old diagram of the Grand Mosque in Mecca from a long time ago, and um, the mosque is the mosque is not dead center at the heart of the city, but it is the heart of worship activities in the city, and because due to its massive concentration of worship activities and people, then other supporting activities sprawled around the Grand Mosque. Um, several years ago, wait, let me orient myself. Because the first and last time I visited the Grand Mosque was in 2000. Cape has changed very much, very dramatically. So what I'm highlighting um, used to be a sprawling market. Used to be a traditional market, or the Arabic word for it would be bazaar. Um, and that bazaar was so lively, full of people, great sights, sounds, and smells, of course. But I think as the demands for service for services, especially worship services, expanded um, such so greatly that the mosque had to accommodate that expansion, and thus expanding its wings. And now they've even added more commercial features or functions right next to it that um, that culminates with this. I call it a Big Ben wannabe. Sorry, but that's the way I see it. Where these buildings here house the 5 or 7 star hotels that they are. So an interesting city to visit if you can visit if you can visit there. Um, it's just that aside from the religious aspects or the religious rituals to it, I think it's a fascinating city to just observe and explore and and immerse yourself in this um, yeah, very different cultural atmosphere. So the next religious city is the Vatican City, or the territory of Vatican City, which is part of Vatican Hill, um, and of the adjacent former Vatican Fields. It is in this territory that several iconic structures are situated, such as Saint Peter's Basilisk, um, Basilico San Pietro, the Apostolic Palace, and the Sistine Chapel, and other museums were built, along with various other buildings, of course. A long, long time ago, this area was a part of the Roman suburb of Borgo, I think it was, and it was only until nine. It was only a part of Rome, administratively a part of Rome. I think up until after World War One. I think just before the 1930s, they they separated themselves from the city of Rome. Um, so the area, the actual borders of the complex, but there was like a some parts of the area is fortified. It's quite heavily fortified, and maybe that's simply because of the hilly terrain of the area, and some other parts are not so heavily fortified. I think if you look along where my pointer is, then that's the heavily fortified area. That's the city walls along here, which may make it look as if it's very heavily secluded. But if you enter directly from the obelisk or this area, then it's completely open. It's like yeah, so it's partially fortified yet not. But yeah, you can explore the area up to some extent. Some places are restricted to visitors for obvious reasons, of course. You don't now well you don't want the management of you don't want and you don't need to see the management of such a place taking place. But it's a fascinating place, and if you do get the chance to go there, it should be in your bucket list of places to visit. This is a much clearer view of the area and its surrounding borders. So I think that the Treaty of 1920 or 1930 that gave the state of Vatican City its form. The boundaries of the proposed territory were influenced by the fact that much of it was all but enclosed by this use this as a territorial border. Um, yeah, like I said, some of the places are not exactly walled in, um, but yeah, it is. it is interesting. It is It is interesting, and it is fascinating. Knowing that this is actually a state or a small country within a city. So yeah, can anybody guess what this where this is? Anybody?
Maybe Jerusalem, sir.
Thank you. That is correct. It is Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is one of the oldest cities in the world. It's considered as a holy. It is considered as a holy site or a holy city to three major um, Abrahamic religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Um, so both Israelis and Palestinians claim Jerusalem as their capital, but so far as Israel maintains its primary governmental institutions there, and the state of Palestine ultimately foresees it as a seat of power. But neither claim, however, I think is widely recognized internationally. But apart from that, I think one of the indicators that it's it's very densely populated, and it may look as if it's kind of organic in its arrangement of settlements, but that's also in response to its very hilly um, terrain. Fun fact, though, throughout its history, I think Jerusalem has been destroyed at least twice. It's been under siege more than more than more than a couple of dozen, I think a couple of dozen times, um, 20 times or so. It's been captured and recaptured for 44 times, and it's been under attack for 52 times. Um, so yeah, it is a very interesting city in the fact that it's quite old and significant to three major religions of the world. However, I think if you compare this, say for example, to Mecca and the Vatican City, where people congregate in that one area um, during certain times of the year. In Jerusalem, maybe because of the political situation, it is not it is not done. It is not so. It is not so heavily. It is not so heavily visited or heavily congregated as Vatican City and Mecca. But I think from the three sample cities, what I'm trying to say is that most of the times it is difficult to see. Most of the times it is difficult to see how if you don't know that this is Jerusalem, if you didn't know that that was Mecca, if you didn't know that that was Vatican City, how can you know that it is a religiously significant place? If you zoom out a bit further, then those religious sites, those holy sites, completely blend with the surrounding environment. There's almost no way of telling. There's almost no way of telling whether that's religiously significant or a significant city for that fact. Um, but anyways, uh, what I'm trying to say is that not it is often not very clear whether a city is whether a city has a significant value or not until you have explored its history and understood its context. So another couple of shots of Jerusalem, and as I mentioned, one of the telltale signs the dense and the dense and sprawling settlement such as this. Um, it may look a bit unorderly. The fact that it's just haphazardly placed, seemingly haphazardly placed, but again, they were responding to the builders were responding to the terrain with the technology they have at hand at that time. I think it's a magnificent place. I haven't been there. I personally haven't been there. I'd like to go there sometime. But yeah, fascinating. This is a map of Bagan. Bagan is an ancient city, and it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site in one of the regions of Myanmar or Burma. Again, as I mentioned, if you look at the map only, if you only look at the map at an aerial shot, where I turned the labels off as well. It's hard to tell that this is a religious site or a religiously significant site. Punch in Bagan, Bagan, in Google Maps or Google Earth if you have, then you can explore that. You can explore the area for yourself. But this was built around the 9th to 13th century, I think. It was the capital of the pagan kingdom, the first kingdom that unified the regions that would later constitute Myanmar. No, just yeah, different regions that would come together and then form Myanmar. And so during the kingdom's height, between the 11th and 13th century, I think there were more than 10,000 Buddhist temples, pagodas, and monasteries that were constructed in buildings alone. And I think today only 2,000 of those temples and pagodas survive. Yeah, from 10,000 to 2,000, that's still quite a lot of temples and pagodas, and again, this is quite a sight to behold. Bagan stands out for not only the sheer number of religious artifacts or religious edifices that dot the area, but it also stands out because of its magnificent architecture. I mean, just look at it. And the contribution and the architectural contribution of these temples to the traditional or the modern day Burmese temple design. So yeah. Again, another interesting site to visit. If you get the chance to go there, go there. And then this is even more unclear. This is Angkor. This is an aerial photo of Angkor Thom. Angkor Thom in in Cambodia. I just put this in maybe because it's so old that it is almost no longer visible from the sky, but this was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, this was the last and the most enduring capital of the Khmer Empire. I think it was built around the 10th or 12th century by Jayavarman VII. It only covers an area of 9 square kilometers, and within that 9 square kilometers, there are several monuments from earlier eras as well as those so from eras before Jayavarman and then eras after Jayavarman. So it used to be quite densely built, or at least the structures that were built are very are clustered in close proximity to one another. the city itself, Angkor Thom, is actually situated not far from a major river system. I think Siem Reap, about a quarter mile away. So that and but I think the most magnificent feature of this place is the faces, or the faces towers, and if you can, well, depending on how big your screen is, but if you can see out some faces there's another one, there's another face, there's another face, there's another face. So it's called the Faces of the 23 Towers or so. This is actually a later addition to the main structure, but yeah, um, we're not archaeologists are not really sure whether these faces resemble or represent the king himself, or perhaps the great Buddha, or any other form of guardians of the empire's cardinal points, or a combination of these. Um, Uh, this is the unfortunately this is just a supplementary image of the Angkor temple complex. Where's A? What where A is? But it consists of Angkor Thom itself, Angkor Wat, then there's Bayan Temple. But this is of a greater region. So within the Angkor Temple complex, there are a few other locations, or a few other significant temples and such. Um, Coming back to Europe, this is another religious site, or religiously significant site. It's not a big city. This is um, a small town called Scherpenheuvel. Scherpenheuvel. In English, the name translates roughly to Sharp Hill, and it is one of the most important pilgrimage sites for Roman Catholics. Situated in Belgium, about 50 kilometers from Brussels. The origins of this city is interestingly dates back to the days of pagan worship. So before Christianity came, pagan worship that still somehow survived during the Middle Ages around a holy oak. Legend has it that citadel here now, but before that there was a big oak tree, a holy oak tree, that grew here. And the oak tree is called a holy oak tree because the tree was shaped like a cross. It was a cross-shaped tree, and so when Christian missionaries came, this area was then subsequently Christianized with a statue of Holy Mary. Legend has it that around 1500 AD, um, around 1500 AD, the Virgin Mary performed a miracle here. So somebody tried to steal the statue of Holy Mary, but the thief somehow was frozen into place. Then thus he failed to take home the small statue. Um, So since then, from the 1550s, so from the mid 16th century, a flood of devoted pilgrims arrived from the surrounding areas, um, came to the tree to pray for the health and recovery of their ill loved ones. So again, this was a site of pagan worship, which was then subsequently transformed into a different form of worship, or a different form of religion. Um, Funnily enough, the whole city was designed to be an allegorical homage to the Mother of God, so to say. A hortus conclusus, symbolizing symbolizing Mother of God's eternal virginity. So that's what the design of the city was supposed to symbolize. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's got 7 sides, so a heptagon, and 7 lanes. As you can see, 6. Where's the other one? Anyways, but 7 lanes. They lead towards the church. So the layout of the city or town is based on a 7-pointed star, which stands for the abundance of God's mercy. In the church, the advent of the advent of Jesus is announced by 6 Old Testament prophets and realized by Mary, who gives birth to the Messiah. In 1609, I think the first stone was put in place for this citadel structure. So in the year 1500, in the 1500s, they believed that Mary performed a miracle there, but it wasn't until 100 years after that that they decided to build. They built a massive monument or a structure to inaugurate or to celebrate the miracle. But yeah. Anyways, it's I think it's an interesting. It is a very interesting. This little town has a very interesting history to it, and I think the layout of the town itself sort of emphasizes the role of a belief system or the role of religion in the society's daily lives. Another European holy site. This one's in France. Saint-Riquier, I can't say it. Saint-Riquier, originally known as Centula or Centulum. It gained fame for its abbey. This abbey was established or was erected in the year 625, so very old, by Richarius, the son of the governor of the town, when the town was within the was under the rule of the Merovingian kingdom. Then the abbey was then continuously built and enriched by subsequent leaders, and I think a population of no more than 1,800 people. It doesn't exactly have the same miraculous journey as Sharp Hill, but nevertheless, seeing that this city grew from an abbey or a place of worship into fascinating. So enough about religion. Let's talk a bit about politics. First of all, cities first emerged as complex forms of social and political organization. And the first or the earliest cities that were the result of these political and social organizations were found in the valleys of Euphrates and the Tigris, the Nile, the Huanghe River, and the Yangtze River. And so these early cities then they broke dramatically. They broke off from the patterns of tribal life and the rural societies from which they sprang. As they developed, kinship was the basis of their society, was the basis of rural society, but then kinship was then replaced by status determined by class and occupation. Back then, the belief system were still animistic or shamanistic, and these animistic or shamanistic leaders of the tribe were then replaced by temple priesthoods that who preside over highly developed religious institutions, and these religious institutions then function as important agencies of social control. So again, from religious values, then evolving to involve a degree of social control. That's why it is no longer. If that's the case, then it is no longer religion. It's called politics. Um, and then if you think about the different forms of leadership in politics, then these different types of leaderships also influence the growth of the cities. So, for example, a kingdom, then the city, a kingdom that is presided over by a king, then the city is oriented towards the heart of the kingdom. The palace where the palace or where the king resides, the king and queen reside. That becomes a center. The center of orientation for the settlements. If the city was led by a commander or a warlord, then the city would be designed to support military activities, especially defense. If the city was presided over by a religious leader, then the city would be oriented towards religious sites. If the city was led by the people, then of course the city would be designed to fulfill the people's needs. So basically, cities whose growth is influenced by political aspects, they can be seen from how the power holder implements their authority physically. So and that changes over time as well. This is a sample of one of the oldest great settlements. Persepolis in Persia was built in I think the 5th century, 6th century BC, so 515 BC. It was built during the reigns of Darius to Xerxes. You may have heard of Xerxes from the 300 and the Spartan and the Spartan film series. So the floor plan here of the structure with multiple pillars is known as the Apadana. The Apadana of King Darius. You can see the ruins in the image below, and this is a mural of the King Xerxes the Great and his army. All right, but I think nothing reflects the political power of its ruler better than Palmanova in Italy. It is a town and commune in northeast Italy. The town is a very, very good example of a star fort of the late Renaissance era. It was built by the Venetian Republic in the 1500s, early 1600s, late 1500s, early 1600s. The fortifications are included in UNESCO's World Heritage Site list as part of the Venetian Works of Defense. So this was built using the latest military innovations of the 16th century. This small town was a fortress in the shape of a 9-pointed star this time. Compare that to Sharp Hill, which was 7-pointed star. This is a 9-pointed star. So between the points of the star, ramparts protruded, so that the point star, and then these are the ramparts that protrude. Then, of course, what would a classic defense fort be without the moat or the river that surround the town? And the city or the town can be accessed through 3 large guarded gates, 1, 2, and 3. So the way they constructed this was constructing the first circle, and then they continue to build outwards until they reach a total circumference of about 7 kilometers. And I think the city itself took about 30 years to build. Um, yeah. So subsequently, as the city grew, or as the town grew, as the people inside it, as the town grew, then more fortifications and the outer lines of fortifications um, were modified to continuously house the inhabitants inside it. Again, this is one of the places that I haven't been to, but I'd love to be able to visit there sometime, and I think you should too. Um, the Acropolis is not exactly a town or a city. The Acropolis of Athens is actually an ancient citadel. It's actually a complex or a temple of worship, but um, but it does somehow reflect the construction of it, the provision or the commission for construction actually reflects a very high political power um, of that time. So the Acropolis of Athens is, as I said, an ancient citadel, and these acropoli often occupy a rocky outcrop that is situated above a city. So the Acropolis is not only exclusively is not it does not belong exclusively to Athens, but there are several other acropoli um, across ancient Greece in different cities. But I think the most famous structure in the Acropolis of Athens is the. And so this is the the citadel, the complex of the citadel complex itself is not just does not just serve the purpose of worship, but there are also some evidence of people actually inhabiting the Acropolis as far back as I think the fourth millennium BC. This is the layout or diagram of the layout of the Acropolis of Athens. There are a total of about 20 or 21 structures that are situated that are situated on top of the hill. But no, I'm sorry. I don't think the Acropolis. I don't think the Acropolis actually reflect political power that much, but not so much as the next one, which is the Forum Romanum or the Roman Forum. Um, it's basically a rectangular forum or a rectangular plaza or piazza, surrounded by the ruins of several important ancient government buildings at the heart of Rome. Citizens of the ancient city referred to this place or to this space, originally a marketplace, as the Forum Magnum, or simply the Forum. For centuries, the Forum was the center of day-to-day life in Rome, and elections, the venue for public speeches. Um, in Javanese, the Forum Romanum would be known as alun-alun, actually, because that's what we do. That's what the alun-alun is there for, to hold public speeches, criminal trials. Although Alun Alun does not have gladiatorial matches, but Forum Romanum does, and it is also the nucleus of commercial affairs. Here, statues and monuments commemorated the city's great men. This has been called the most celebrated meeting place in the world and in all history. Um, it's not because it's now just nowadays it's just unfortunately nowadays it's just ruins. But I think you I think you can still sense the grandeur and the magnificence of the place. I would say. Um, I think it's because of I think it's because of the scale of the forum that captivated me when I came to visit there. But um, other than that, I think it's just magnificent that it reflects power, that it reflects order. Yet at the same time, since this was a forum, this was a public place where you can speak your mind freely. This was also a place of discussion and discourse. Um, that's all that I have for now. Still have some other examples to show you, but I'm going to save that for our next session. So before I end, I'd like to invite anyone who would like to perhaps comment or perhaps even give some clarification on, or perhaps even remind me of the things that I might have missed while delivering this lecture. Questions, comments, anyone? All right then. Well, I will be I'll be touching on a little bit more of the political aspects in our next meeting, and hopefully also I'd also like to actually touch on I'd also like to touch on analytical techniques, on how we can analyze urban form. Um, Hopefully we have time to do that next week. So right after we discuss a little bit more about the political forces that shape the cities. If Don't forget to mark your attendance if you haven't done so already. And I thank you very much for your undivided attention this afternoon. And I look forward to seeing you all again next week. So take care, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and have a great afternoon.